The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Catherine's Cathedral, casting rainbow patterns across the marble floor, where 200 guests would soon witness what they believed would be the wedding of the century. Isabella Martinez stood before the ornate mirror in the bridal suite, her reflection showing a vision of perfection in ivory silk and Belgian lace. Her grandmother's pearl necklace rested against her collarbone, a family heirloom that had blessed 3 generations of brides with supposedly eternal love. But beneath the flawless makeup and radiant smile, Isabella's heart carried a weight that threatened to shatter the carefully constructed facade of her perfect day. For 18 months, Isabella had poured her soul into planning every detail of this moment. She had chosen the flowers personally, tasted dozens of cake samples, and spent countless nights addressing invitations by hand because she believed that personal touches mattered in a world growing increasingly cold and disconnected. Her fiancé, Marcus Wellington, came from one of the city's most prominent families, and their union represented more than just love. It was the merging of 2 business empires, 2 legacies, 2 futures that seemed destined to create something beautiful and lasting. Marcus had swept her off her feet during their first encounter at a charity gala 2 years prior. He was charming, successful, and possessed the kind of confidence that made everyone in the room turn when he spoke. His proposal had been orchestrated like a Hollywood production, complete with a flash mob, a string quartet, and a 5-carat diamond that caught the light like captured starlight. Isabella had said yes without hesitation, believing she had found her soulmate, the man who would stand beside her through every triumph and tragedy that life might bring. The wedding preparations had consumed their lives, but Isabella had embraced every moment of the chaos. She attended dress fittings, cake tastings, and venue walkthroughs with the enthusiasm of someone who truly believed she was creating the foundation for a lifetime of happiness. Marcus seemed equally invested, though in retrospect, Isabella would realize that his enthusiasm was perhaps more focused on the business connections and social advancement that their marriage would provide rather than the emotional bond they were supposedly cementing. As the morning progressed, the cathedral filled with guests who represented the cream of society. Politicians, business leaders, celebrities, and socialites all gathered to witness what the local newspapers had dubbed the wedding of the decade. The flower arrangements alone had cost more than most people's annual salaries, and the reception promised to be an event that would be talked about for years to come. Isabella's parents, hard-working immigrants who had built their construction business from nothing, beamed with pride at their daughter's apparent triumph, though they privately worried that the grandeur of the occasion overshadowed the simple love they had hoped she would find. In the groom's quarters, Marcus adjusted his Italian silk tie for the 10th time, his hands trembling slightly, though not from nervousness about the commitment he was about to make. His best man, Jonathan Pierce, sat nearby scrolling through his phone with an expression that seemed oddly tense for someone who should have been celebrating his closest friend's happiness. The 2 men had been inseparable since their Harvard days, sharing secrets, conquests, and business deals with the casual intimacy of brothers. But today, their usual easy banter was replaced by an uncomfortable silence that hung in the air like an unspoken truth waiting to be revealed. Isabella's maid of honor, her sister Carmen, bustled around the bridal suite, making final adjustments to the dress and ensuring that every detail was perfect. She had noticed her sister's occasional distant looks during the past few weeks, but attributed them to normal pre-wedding jitters. Carmen herself had married young and understood the mixture of excitement and terror that accompanied such a momentous life decision. She spoke softly about how beautiful Isabella looked and how proud their parents were, trying to fill the silence with reassuring words that seemed to bounce off her sister's increasingly distant demeanor. The photographer captured every moment with artistic precision, creating images that would later seem haunting in their beauty and deception. Isabella's smile appeared genuine in every shot, a testament to her strength and determination to make this day perfect regardless of the growing unease in her chest. She had learned from her mother that sometimes women must carry their pain silently, that grace under pressure was a virtue that would serve her well throughout life. But grace, Isabella was about to discover, could only stretch so far before it snapped and revealed something far more dangerous underneath. The cathedral's bells chimed 11 o'clock as Isabella made her final preparations, unaware that her world was about to crumble in the most devastating way possible. Carmen had stepped out to coordinate with the wedding planner, leaving Isabella alone for the first time that morning. The silence felt heavy, almost oppressive, as if the universe itself was holding its breath before delivering a blow that would change everything. Isabella reached for her phone to send Marcus a sweet message before the ceremony, a tradition they had maintained throughout their relationship, when she noticed something that made her blood run cold. A text message notification glowed on her screen, but it wasn't from Marcus. It was from an unknown number, and the preview showed only a few words that seemed innocent enough. "You deserve to know the truth." Isabella's finger hovered over the message, her intuition screaming warnings that she chose to ignore. Perhaps it was spam, or maybe someone had sent a message to the wrong number. But something deeper, some primal instinct that women develop when they sense betrayal, compelled her to open it completely. What she saw next would haunt her for the rest of her life. The message contained a series of photographs and audio files, each one more damaging than the last. The photos showed Marcus in intimate situations with multiple women over the past 6 months, including some that had been taken just days before their wedding. But it was the audio file that delivered the killing blow. Her hands shaking, Isabella pressed play and heard Marcus's voice, clear and unmistakable, speaking to someone on what appeared to be a recorded phone call from the previous night. "Listen, Jonathan, I know you think I'm crazy for going through with this wedding, but you have to understand the bigger picture." Marcus's voice crackled through her phone speaker. "Isabella is perfect on paper. Her family's construction business is exactly what we need to expand our real estate empire. Once we're married, I'll have access to their contracts, their connections, everything we've been working toward for the past 2 years. And let's be honest, she's so naive and trusting that she'll never suspect anything." Isabella felt the world tilting beneath her feet as Marcus continued his conversation with his best man, the same Jonathan who would be standing at the altar in less than an hour. "The prenup protects most of my assets, but gives me complete access to hers. Her father insisted on some ridiculous clause about faithfulness, but what he doesn't know won't hurt him, right? I mean, I care about Isabella. I really do, but this is business. Love is a luxury I can't afford right now." Jonathan's laughter echoed through the recording, a sound that made Isabella's stomach churn with revulsion. "And what about after the honeymoon? Are you really going to play the devoted husband forever?" Marcus's response cut through Isabella's heart like a blade dipped in poison. "Give me a year, maybe 2. Long enough to secure the business deals and get her pregnant. A baby will keep her occupied and less likely to ask questions about my whereabouts. After that, well, marriages fail all the time. I'll be the grieving divorced husband who tried his best but couldn't make it work." The audio file contained more devastating details about Marcus's affairs, his gambling debts that Isabella knew nothing about, and his plan to use her family's money to pay off dangerous people who were threatening his safety. But perhaps the most crushing revelation was his casual dismissal of her love, reducing their entire relationship to a calculated business transaction. He spoke about her with the same tone someone might use when discussing a stock purchase or real estate investment: cold, calculating, and completely devoid of genuine affection. Isabella sat in stunned silence as the full weight of her situation crashed down upon her. Everything she had believed about their relationship was a carefully constructed lie. Every tender moment, every promise, every dream they had shared about their future together had been nothing more than Marcus playing a role to secure his financial goals. The man she was supposed to marry in less than an hour saw her as nothing more than a means to an end, a naive woman whose trust and resources could be exploited for his benefit. But as the initial shock began to wear off, something else started to emerge from the depths of Isabella's soul. It wasn't the crushing despair that might have been expected, nor the self-pity that could have consumed her in such a moment. Instead, a cold, calculated fury began to build, starting as a small flame in her chest and spreading through her entire being like wildfire. Marcus had made one crucial miscalculation in his elaborate scheme. He had underestimated exactly who Isabella Martinez really was beneath her gentle exterior. The woman staring back at her from the mirror was no longer the trusting, naive bride who had woken up that morning full of hope and love. In her place stood someone far more dangerous, someone who had inherited not just her father's business acumen, but also her mother's fierce protective instincts and her grandmother's legendary capacity for patience and strategic thinking. Marcus wanted to play games with people's lives and hearts, but he was about to discover that he had chosen the wrong opponent. Isabella smiled slowly, and for the first time that day, it was completely genuine. Isabella's transformation was as swift as it was complete. Within minutes of hearing Marcus's betrayal, her mind had shifted from that of a heartbroken bride to something far more calculating and dangerous. She forwarded the anonymous message to her personal email and saved copies of all the evidence on her cloud storage, her fingers moving with mechanical precision as she documented every piece of Marcus's deception. But preservation of evidence was only the beginning of what would become the most spectacular wedding day revenge in the city's history. The anonymous sender had included more than just the devastating audio recording. There were bank statements showing Marcus's gambling debts totaling over $2 million, photographs of him with loan sharks and dangerous criminals, and most damning of all, copies of emails between Marcus and Jonathan discussing their plan to forge Isabella's signature on business documents after the wedding. They had researched her family's assets down to the smallest detail, including properties and contracts that Isabella herself didn't even know existed. The level of premeditation was staggering, revealing a conspiracy that had been months in the making. As Isabella processed the magnitude of Marcus's betrayal, she realized that the anonymous tip had come at the perfect moment, not early enough for her to cancel the wedding and retreat in private shame, but just late enough for her to turn the tables in the most public and devastating way possible. Someone out there wanted Marcus exposed, and they had chosen Isabella as their instrument of justice. She would not disappoint them, nor would she disappoint herself by allowing this man to continue his pattern of deception and manipulation. Carmen returned to find her sister sitting calmly in the bridal chair, her makeup perfectly intact and her dress still flawless. But there was something different about Isabella's posture, a stillness that seemed almost predatory. "Everything okay, Hermana?" Carmen asked, using the childhood nickname that usually brought a smile to Isabella's face. But today, Isabella's smile carried something else entirely, a coldness that made Carmen take an unconscious step backward. "Everything is perfect," Isabella replied, her voice steady and controlled in a way that would have alarmed anyone who knew her well. "Carmen, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to trust me completely without asking questions. Can you do that?" Her sister nodded, recognizing the tone that Isabella had inherited from their mother, the voice that emerged when the Martinez women meant business. "I need you to quietly ask the photographer and videographer to make sure they capture everything that happens during the ceremony. Tell them it's extremely important that they don't miss a single moment." While Carmen went to handle that task, Isabella opened her laptop and began composing what would become the most viral social media post in the city's recent memory. She connected her social accounts to the cathedral's Wi-Fi and began uploading the evidence files, crafting captions that would ensure maximum impact. But she wasn't ready to publish anything yet. Timing would be everything for what she had planned. Isabella then called her father's attorney, Elena Rodriguez, who had handled the family's legal affairs for over a decade. Elena was known for her fierce protection of her clients and her ability to act quickly in crisis situations. "Elena, it's Isabella. I need you to meet me at the cathedral immediately. Bring whatever you need to void a marriage contract and protect our family's assets. I can't explain everything over the phone, but Marcus Wellington is not who he thought he was." The steel in Isabella's voice convinced Elena that this was not a case of pre-wedding jitters. Within 20 minutes, Elena arrived with a briefcase full of legal documents and a grim expression that suggested she was prepared for battle. Isabella quickly briefed her on the situation, showing her the evidence and explaining her suspicions about Marcus's true intentions. Elena's face grew darker with each revelation, her legal mind immediately grasping the full scope of the attempted fraud. "Isabella, we can stop this wedding right now," Elena said firmly. "We can have security escort him out and save you from any further humiliation." But Isabella shook her head with a smile that would have made a shark nervous. "No, Elena. Stopping the wedding would let him off too easily. He would just find another victim, another family to exploit. What I have in mind will ensure that Marcus Wellington never gets the opportunity to deceive anyone ever again." As the final hour before the ceremony approached, Isabella made her last preparations. She texted her parents, asking them to trust her no matter what happened during the ceremony, promising to explain everything afterward. She instructed Carmen to make sure that all the family's most important business associates and social connections were positioned where they would have the clearest view of the altar. Most importantly, she sent a message to the mysterious anonymous sender. Thank you for the truth. Watch the ceremony. Justice will be served. The cathedral was now filled to capacity, with guests taking their seats and admiring the elaborate decorations that Isabella had so carefully chosen months earlier. The irony was not lost on her that she had created the perfect stage for Marcus's public destruction. Every detail that she had planned with love and hope would now serve a very different purpose. They would bear witness to the downfall of a man who had mistaken kindness for weakness and trust for stupidity. As the wedding march began to play in the distance, Isabella took one final look at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back at her was still beautiful, still elegant, still every inch the perfect bride. But her eyes held a fire that hadn't been there that morning, and her smile promised consequences that Marcus Wellington could never have anticipated. He wanted to use her wedding day to secure his fraudulent future, but instead, it would become the day his carefully constructed life came crashing down around him. The cathedral's organ filled the sacred space with the haunting melody of Pachelbel's canon as Isabella began her walk down the aisle, each step measured and deliberate like a predator approaching unsuspecting prey. The 200 guests rose to their feet in unison, their faces filled with admiration and joy as they witnessed what they believed to be a fairy tale come to life. Isabella's father, Roberto Martinez, walked beside her with tears in his eyes, completely unaware that his daughter was about to orchestrate the most devastating public humiliation in the cathedral's century-long history. Marcus stood at the altar in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, his smile radiant and confident as he watched his bride approach. To everyone in attendance, he appeared to be the picture of a man deeply in love, his eyes never leaving Isabella's face as she glided toward him in her flowing gown. Jonathan Pierce stood beside him as best man, occasionally checking his phone with the nervous energy of someone who knew secrets were dangerous things. Neither man had any idea that their private conversation from the previous night was about to become very public knowledge. As Isabella reached the altar, she accepted Marcus's outstretched hand with a smile that could have melted hearts or frozen blood, depending on one's perspective. Father Michael O'Brien, who had known Isabella's family for years, began the ceremony with his usual warmth and gravitas, speaking about love, commitment, and the sacred bond of marriage. His words took on an almost prophetic quality as he discussed the importance of honesty and trust in a marriage, causing Isabella's smile to deepen with dark irony. The ceremony proceeded normally through the opening prayers and readings, with Isabella's cousin Maria delivering a beautiful passage about love from Corinthians that now seemed to mock Marcus's deception. Isabella played her part flawlessly, responding to each ritual with perfect timing and appropriate emotion. But those who knew her best began to notice something unusual in her demeanor, a stillness that seemed almost supernatural, as if she were drawing power from some hidden reservoir of strength. When Father O'Brien reached the portion of the ceremony where he asked if anyone had objections to the union, Isabella felt her heart rate spike with anticipation. The cathedral fell into complete silence, as was traditional, but instead of the brief pause that usually followed, Isabella stepped forward slightly and spoke in a voice that carried clearly to every corner of the sacred space. Actually, Father, I have something to say before we continue. The shock that rippled through the congregation was almost palpable, with gasps and murmurs erupting from guests who had never witnessed such a deviation from wedding protocol. Marcus's face went pale as confusion, and the first hints of panic began to cloud his features. Isabella, what are you doing? He whispered urgently, but she ignored him completely, her attention focused on the crowd of witnesses who had come to celebrate what they thought was her happiness. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and family, I want to thank you all for being here today to witness what I had hoped would be the beginning of my new life, Isabella began, her voice steady and clear despite the magnitude of what she was about to unleash. However, I recently learned some information about my intended husband that I believe you all should hear before we proceed with these vows. The cathedral had become so quiet that even the smallest whisper would have echoed off the stone walls. Isabella reached into her bouquet and withdrew her phone, an action that caused Marcus to grab her wrist in panic. "Isabella, stop this right now. You're embarrassing yourself," he hissed, but she pulled away from him with a strength that surprised both of them. "On the contrary, Marcus, I'm saving myself, and I'm saving every other woman you might have targeted after me." What happened next would be replayed on social media millions of times over the following days. Isabella activated the cathedral's sound system, which she had secretly arranged with the audio technician earlier that morning, and Marcus's voice began to fill the sacred space with crystal clarity. "Listen, Jonathan, I know you think I'm crazy for going through with this wedding, but you have to understand the bigger picture. Isabella is perfect on paper. Her family's construction business is exactly what we need to expand our real estate empire." The effect on the congregation was immediate and devastating. Gasps of horror echoed through the cathedral as Marcus's recorded voice continued to detail his plan to exploit Isabella and her family. Several of Isabella's relatives began shouting in Spanish, their voices mixing with the English expressions of outrage from other guests. Marcus lunged forward to try to grab the phone, but Roberto Martinez, understanding immediately what was happening, stepped between them with a look that could have melted steel. Jonathan Pierce attempted to leave through a side exit, but found his path blocked by Isabella's cousins, who had positioned themselves strategically throughout the cathedral on Isabella's earlier instructions. The best man's face had gone ashen as his own laughter echoed through the sound system, his complicity in the deception now exposed to everyone present. Camera phones appeared throughout the congregation as guests began recording the spectacular downfall of a man who had been respected in their social circle for years. Marcus's voice continued to play, each revelation more damaging than the last, detailing not only his plan to defraud Isabella's family, but also his numerous affairs and his massive gambling debts. When the recording reached the part where he discussed getting Isabella pregnant to keep her distracted while he plundered her family's assets, several women in the congregation began crying, not tears of joy, but tears of rage on behalf of the sister they now realized had been targeted by a predator. As the audio file reached its conclusion, Isabella finally spoke again, her voice cutting through the chaos with supernatural calm. "Marcus Wellington, you wanted to use our wedding day to secure your fraudulent future. Instead, you just witnessed the end of everything you've worked to build. I hope the performance was worth it, because it's the last one you'll ever give." The chaos that erupted in the cathedral following Isabella's revelation was unlike anything the sacred space had ever witnessed in its long history. Marcus stood frozen at the altar, his face cycling through expressions of shock, rage, and desperate calculation as he realized the full scope of his public destruction. The recording had ended, but its impact reverberated through the congregation like shockwaves from an explosion, with guests shouting, crying, and frantically sharing the spectacle on their social media accounts in real time. "You have no idea what you've just done," Marcus snarled at Isabella, his charming facade finally cracking to reveal the cold, calculating predator underneath. "Do you think this is some kind of game? You just destroyed both of us." But Isabella's smile only widened, revealing a satisfaction that ran deeper than mere revenge. "No, Marcus, I've just saved myself and every other woman you would have targeted after me. And I'm not finished yet." Isabella raised her hand for silence, and remarkably, the congregation began to quiet down, drawn by the magnetic power of a woman who had just demonstrated that she was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. "Before everyone leaves, I think you should know that Marcus's deception goes much deeper than just lying to me about his intentions. Elena, would you please explain to our guests what else we discovered?" Elena Rodriguez stepped forward with her briefcase, her presence commanding immediate attention from the crowd. As the Martinez family's attorney, she was known and respected by many of the business leaders in attendance. "Ladies and gentlemen, based on evidence provided by Isabella, we've discovered that Marcus Wellington has been operating an elaborate fraud scheme targeting wealthy families throughout the city. Isabella's family was not his first victim, nor would they have been his last." The revelation hit the congregation like a second wave of shock. Elena continued, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades in courtrooms. "We have evidence of at least 3 other families who have been defrauded by Mr. Wellington using similar methods. Bank documents show that he has stolen over $5 million through fake investment schemes and forged contracts. Several of you in this congregation may have been his next targets. Marcus attempted to deny the allegations, but his protestations were drowned out by the growing anger of the crowd. Several prominent businessmen who had considered investing with Marcus began demanding answers, their voices rising above the general chaos. Isabella watched the destruction with cold satisfaction, knowing that her revenge was far more complete than Marcus could have imagined when he woke up that morning. But Isabella wasn't finished with her orchestrated revelation. She had saved the most devastating blow for last, and now she delivered it with surgical precision. There's one more thing everyone should know about the man I almost married. Marcus, would you like to tell everyone about Victoria Sinclair, or should I? At the mention of that name, Marcus's face went completely white, and several gasps erupted from guests who recognized the significance. Victoria Sinclair had been a prominent socialite who had died in a suspicious car accident 6 months earlier, just weeks after she had reportedly discovered her fiancé's infidelity and threatened to expose his business dealings. The police had ruled an accident, but rumors had circulated through high society that her death had been too convenient for certain people who had much to lose from her revelations. Isabella's implication was clear, and the effect on the congregation was electric. "You're insane," Marcus whispered, but his denial lacked conviction, and the fear in his eyes suggested that Isabella's accusation had hit closer to the truth than he was comfortable admitting. Victoria's death was an accident. You can't prove anything. But Isabella's smile suggested otherwise, and she gestured to Elena, who produced another folder from her briefcase. "Actually, Marcus, we can prove quite a lot. It seems Victoria had been gathering evidence about your business practices before her death, and she had given copies to someone she trusted. That same someone has now provided us with everything Victoria discovered, including recorded conversations and financial documents that paint a very different picture of your relationship with her." The cathedral had become a courtroom, with Isabella serving as prosecutor, judge, and jury all at once. The guests watched in fascination and horror as Marcus's entire life unraveled before their eyes, each revelation more damning than the last. Social media was already exploding with videos and commentary about the wedding that had become a public trial, with hashtags like #WeddingRevenge and #JusticeForIsabella trending within minutes. Marcus made one final desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. "None of this matters," he declared, his voice rising to a shout that echoed off the cathedral walls. "We're legally married now. The ceremony was completed. You can't undo what's been done." But Isabella's laughter was like silver bells ringing in a graveyard, beautiful and chilling at the same time. "Oh, Marcus, you really haven't been paying attention, have you?" Isabella gestured to Father O'Brien, who had been standing in stunned silence throughout the entire revelation. "Father, would you please explain to Marcus the legal status of our marriage?" The elderly priest, his face grave with the weight of what he had witnessed, stepped forward with a solemnity that made the entire cathedral hold its breath. "The marriage ceremony was never completed," Father O'Brien announced, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "The exchange of vows never took place. In the eyes of both God and the law, no marriage has occurred here today. Mr. Wellington, you are not, and will never be, Isabella's husband." The finality in the priest's voice was like a death knell for Marcus's dreams of wealth and social advancement. As the full realization of his complete and utter defeat sank in, Marcus's composure finally shattered completely. The man who had entered the cathedral that morning believing he was about to secure his financial future through calculated deception was now facing public humiliation, criminal charges, and the complete destruction of his reputation. And standing before him, still radiant in her wedding gown, was the woman who had orchestrated his downfall with a precision and ruthlessness that would have impressed master strategists throughout history. The aftermath of Isabella's revelation transformed the cathedral from a sacred space of union into something resembling a battlefield where justice had finally found its target. Marcus stood alone at the altar, abandoned even by Jonathan Pierce, who had managed to slip away during the chaos despite Isabella's earlier precautions. The congregation buzzed with a mixture of admiration for Isabella's courage and horror at the depth of Marcus's deception, their phones capturing every moment of his public destruction for posterity. Detective Sarah Chun, who had been attending the wedding as a family friend, pushed through the crowd with the authority of someone who had just witnessed a confession to multiple felonies. Isabella had planned for this moment too, having quietly informed Detective Chun about the evidence she had discovered, ensuring that law enforcement would be present when Marcus's crimes were exposed. "Marcus Wellington, you need to come with me," Detective Chun announced, her badge visible as she approached the altar. "We have some questions about Victoria Sinclair's death and several fraud investigations." The sight of handcuffs being produced in the cathedral sent shockwaves through the remaining guests, many of whom were prominent citizens unaccustomed to witnessing arrests at social gatherings. Marcus's legs seemed to give out beneath him as the full weight of his situation became clear. He wasn't just facing public humiliation and financial ruin. He was looking at serious prison time for fraud and potentially murder charges if the investigation into Victoria's death revealed what Isabella suspected it would. "This is all lies," Marcus protested weakly as Detective Chen read him his rights, but his voice lacked the conviction that had once made him so persuasive in business meetings and social gatherings. "Isabella is a scorned woman who's making up stories because she found out about my affairs. None of this evidence is real." But even as he spoke, his eyes darted toward the exits, suggesting that his denials were more for the benefit of the remaining guests than any real belief in his own innocence. Isabella watched the arrest with the calm satisfaction of someone who had achieved perfect justice, but her revenge was not yet complete. As Marcus was being escorted toward the cathedral doors, she called out one final revelation that would ensure his complete and permanent downfall. "Oh, Marcus, before you go, I thought you should know. I'm not the only one you underestimated. Your friend Jonathan has already made a deal with the district attorney's office. He's testifying against you in exchange for immunity." The color drained from Marcus's face as he processed this final betrayal. His best friend, his partner in crime, had abandoned him at the first sign of serious consequences. The loyalty Marcus had counted on was as hollow and self-serving as his own character, and now he faced the legal system alone, without allies or resources to mount an effective defense. The irony was not lost on anyone present that Marcus, who had built his life on manipulating and betraying others, was now experiencing the bitter taste of betrayal himself. As the police led Marcus away, Isabella's father Roberto approached his daughter with tears streaming down his weathered face. "Mija, I am so proud of you," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "You could have hidden from this truth, could have pretended not to know, and lived a lie. Instead, you chose to fight back with courage I didn't know you possessed. Your grandmother would have been proud." The embrace between father and daughter was captured by dozens of cameras, creating an image that would become iconic in discussions about standing up to deception and fraud. The cathedral began to empty as guests processed what they had witnessed, their conversations animated with disbelief and admiration for Isabella's orchestrated revenge. Many of the business leaders present made mental notes to review their own dealings with Marcus, realizing they might have been saved from significant financial losses by Isabella's brave revelation. The story was already spreading beyond the cathedral walls, with news outlets picking up the social media posts and beginning to investigate the broader implications of Marcus's criminal activities. Elena Rodriguez approached Isabella with updates on the legal situation, her face showing the satisfaction of an attorney who had just witnessed perfect justice. "The district attorney is very interested in the evidence you provided," she reported. "With Jonathan's cooperation and the financial documents we've uncovered, they expect to file charges for fraud, money laundering, and potentially conspiracy in Victoria Sinclair's death. Marcus Wellington's criminal empire is finished." Carmen embraced her sister with tears of pride and relief, finally understanding why Isabella had seemed so distant during the morning preparations. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice filled with admiration for Isabella's strength and strategic thinking. Isabella's response revealed the depth of her planning and the steel core that had been hidden beneath her gentle exterior. "I suspected something was wrong for weeks, but I only had proof this morning. I spent the last few hours planning the perfect way to expose him publicly and ensure he could never hurt anyone else." As the cathedral emptied and the chaos subsided, Isabella remained standing at the altar in her wedding gown, surrounded by the elaborate decorations she had chosen months earlier when she still believed in love and forever. But instead of feeling defeated or bitter, she felt liberated, as if a weight she hadn't even realized she was carrying had been lifted from her shoulders. The woman who had entered the cathedral that morning as a naive bride had emerged as something far more powerful. A force of justice who had turned her wedding day into Marcus Wellington's judgment day. Father O'Brien approached Isabella with gentle concern, his decades of pastoral experience having shown him many human tragedies, but few reversals of fortune as dramatic as what he had just witnessed. "My child, are you all right? What you've done today took incredible courage, but I worry about the emotional toll this has taken on you." Isabella's response revealed the transformation that had occurred within her soul over the past few hours, showing that sometimes the greatest growth comes from the deepest betrayals. Isabella's response to Father O'Brien carried the wisdom of someone who had been forced to grow years in the span of a single morning. "Father, for the first time in months, I feel completely at peace. I thought love meant trusting blindly, but now I understand that real love requires courage. The courage to demand truth, to stand up for what's right, and to protect not just yourself, but others who might be hurt by evil disguised as charm." Her words resonated through the nearly empty cathedral, carrying a weight that suggested this experience had fundamentally changed her understanding of strength and justice. In the days that followed, Isabella's wedding revenge became a phenomenon that transcended social media trends and entered the realm of cultural legend. News outlets from around the world picked up the story, with headlines like "Bride's Perfect Revenge" and "The Wedding That Brought Down a Criminal Empire" dominating international coverage. But more importantly, Isabella's courage inspired other victims of Marcus's schemes to come forward, creating an avalanche of evidence that ensured his conviction on multiple charges including fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy in Victoria Sinclair's death. The investigation revealed that Marcus's criminal activities were far more extensive than anyone had initially suspected. He had been operating a complex network of fraudulent investment schemes, using his charm and social connections to target wealthy families across multiple states. The total amount of his theft exceeded $15 million, and investigators discovered evidence linking him to at least 2 other suspicious deaths of individuals who had threatened to expose his activities. Isabella's decision to expose him publicly had potentially saved dozens of future victims and brought justice to those who had already suffered. Jonathan Pierce's testimony proved devastating to any remaining defense Marcus might have mounted. Under immunity protection, Jonathan revealed the intricate details of their partnership, including how they had researched potential victims, forged documents, and even planned the timing of Marcus's relationships to coincide with business opportunities. The recordings of their conversations, combined with financial evidence and witness testimony, created an airtight case that resulted in Marcus receiving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. 6 months after the wedding that never was, Isabella stood in a courtroom as Marcus was sentenced, wearing not a wedding gown, but a sharp business suit that reflected the steel-spined woman she had become. She had been asked to provide a victim impact statement, and her words carried the power to heal not just herself, but all the victims whose lives Marcus had shattered. "Your Honor, Marcus Wellington stole more than money from his victims. He stole their ability to trust, their belief in goodness, their faith in love itself. But by facing the truth and fighting back, we've all learned that we're stronger than we knew, and that justice, while sometimes delayed, is never truly denied." Isabella's transformation extended far beyond personal growth. She used her newfound notoriety to establish the Isabella Martinez Foundation for fraud victims, providing legal assistance and emotional support to others who had been targeted by sophisticated scammers. Her organization became a model for victim advocacy, helping law enforcement agencies develop better methods for identifying and prosecuting complex fraud schemes. The foundation's motto, "Courage creates justice," became a rallying cry for those who refused to remain silent in the face of deception. A year after the wedding, Isabella received an unexpected visitor at her office. Victoria Sinclair's sister, Margaret, had come to thank the woman who had finally brought their family the justice they had sought since Victoria's death. "My sister would have admired your courage," Margaret said, tears streaming down her face. She tried to expose Marcus, but died before she could finish gathering evidence. You completed what she started, and now she can finally rest in peace. The meeting brought closure not just to Victoria's family, but to Isabella herself, confirming that her decision to fight back had served a purpose greater than personal revenge. The anonymous sender who had provided Isabella with the evidence was eventually revealed to be one of Marcus's earlier victims, a woman named Catherine Walsh whose family had lost their business to one of his investment schemes. Catherine had spent 2 years gathering evidence against Marcus, waiting for the perfect moment to expose him. I knew that if I just went to the police, he would find a way to discredit me, Catherine explained. But I also knew that if he tried to target another family, that would be my chance to stop him forever. Isabella's wedding gave me the perfect opportunity to ensure he could never hurt anyone again. As Isabella reflected on the journey that had transformed her from a naive bride into a force for justice, she realized that Marcus's betrayal, while devastating, had ultimately revealed her true strength. She had discovered that real power didn't come from being loved by someone unworthy of that love, but from having the courage to stand up for truth and justice, even when it meant sacrificing everything she thought she wanted. The wedding that was supposed to be the beginning of her fairy tale had instead become the origin story of a woman who refused to let evil prosper in silence. Standing in her office overlooking the city where Marcus once operated his criminal empire, Isabella smiled as she read letters from victims whose lives had been rebuilt with the Foundation's help. Her wedding dress hung in her closet as a reminder not of what she had lost, but of what she had gained. The knowledge that sometimes the greatest act of love is having the courage to expose lies, fight for justice, and protect others from the predators who would exploit trust and kindness. Marcus Wellington had intended to use her wedding day to secure his fraudulent future, but instead, Isabella had used it to ensure that justice would always have the final word.